Good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to the City of Casey Council meeting, 18th of April. My name's Noeline Duff and I'm the Chair of Administrators. Thank you for those of you who have joined us with the gallery today and also those watching live stream. I'll start with introducing my colleague panel members. Firstly, on the screen, we have Mr. Cameron Boardman.
Good afternoon, Chair. I apologise I can't join you in person due to other commitments, but thank you for allowing me to join virtually.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. And Mr. Belmar.
Good afternoon, Chair.
And we're also joined today by our Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Glenn Patterson, and a number of senior staff, Marion Gregg, Acting Director, Customer and Business Transformation, James Collins, Director, City Planning and Infrastructure, Callum Patty, Director, Community Life, Holly de Kretzer, Acting Director, Corporate Services, Nicole Rode, our Governance Support Officer this afternoon, and also Jordan Barefoot, the AV Technician. So thank you all for being here, and a number of other senior officers of Council who are supporting the meeting. I'd like to open the meeting with the Statement of Acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. The Diversity Statement. The City of Casey is home to remarkable diversity with many cultures, languages, faiths and communities of worship, ages, LGBTQI+ identities and landscapes, together forming our rich and dynamic community story. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. I'll now move to item 2, which is the confirmation of minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of March 2023. Is there a mover and seconder?
Yes, I'll move those.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Seconder?
Second, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. All in favour? Carried. Item 3 is declaration of interests. I've considered my obligations under Section 130 of the Local Government Act 2020 and have no conflict of interest to declare relevant to the agenda papers this afternoon. I invite any council officers or my fellow colleague board members to nominate any conflicts apparent.
I likewise have no conflicts to declare.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar.
Chair, I also have no conflicts.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. I now move to item 4, public question time.
Sorry, Chair, I just need to declare an interest in a confidential matter relating to the performance review.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will note that, Mr. Patterson. We'll note that for the purpose of the minutes. Thank you. Item 4 is public question time. There are 9 public questions submitted through Council's website for this afternoon's Council meeting, and I'll work through those in sequence. Question 1 is from Lara Jawab, and the subject matter is community safety, gender equality, cultural diversity and inclusivity. And there are 2 questions posed from this submitter. First question is, with the recent queer-phobic happenings, how can the City of Casey assure that these situations to be de-escalated and ensure there is fairness between groups? And the second question is, the City of Casey has preached and many times engaged community members to get their opinions regarding the above subject. But many conversations later, there's still no clear action that is reflective of these conversations. I wonder if any of the management or councillors are aware of this, and I want to know what they are doing to ensure these consultations don't die in vain. I also note that there were 2 very similar questions posed by Elisa Lamb and Kat Emerson, and we will answer their questions as part of this response. The City of Casey prides itself on being an inclusive organisation that aims to support everyone in our community, irrespective of their age, ethnicity, cultural heritage or gender identity. This includes our ongoing commitment to promoting opportunities for engagement, advocacy and partnerships to support those that identify as members of the LGBTIQA+ community and their allies. Council has developed and delivered events with and on behalf of our LGBTIQA+ community, and we will continue to do so as part of our work to extend and improve equity and inclusion within our community of Casey. The recent example of a workshop series being cancelled was done after consultation with key community stakeholders and with careful consideration in the interest of community safety. Council's overarching commitment to community safety centres on our duty of care to ensure people are not knowingly exposed to acts of aggression and antisocial behaviour. In all events, we will continue to prioritise the safety and security of visitors and staff so that we can continue to offer a welcoming and inclusive space for all. Council fully supports our LGBTIQA+ community. Council has been engaging with people from across Casey to understand the views of those that identify as a member of our LGBTIQA+ community and their allies to inform the development of our inaugural LGBTIQA+ action plan. That consultation started on the 22nd of January this year and has just concluded this past weekend on Sunday, the 16th of April. There'll be a further opportunity for feedback when the draft plan is put out on public exhibition in July of this year. Given our commitment to equity and inclusion, we have recently engaged a dedicated LGBTIQA+ advisor to lead and deliver on the actions of the action plan, and we are in the process of establishing a community reference group to continue to inform and support this important work. The Council's executive leadership team and panel of administrators have been briefed on this work by Council officers and will continue to be appraised of progress. So thank you for the question. Question 2 is from Sean Mulcahy, and the subject is LGBTIQA+ action plan. Given the disturbing events following the last council meeting, could council please provide an update on development of its LGBTIQA+ action plan, including recruitment for the advisory group? In response, council is committed to promoting opportunities for engagement, advocacy, events, safe spaces and partnerships that support the LGBTIQA+ community in Casey. As one of the fastest growing councils in Victoria, we strive to foster an inclusive and accepting environment where everyone feels welcome to live, play, work, connect, and while playing a vital role in the growth and expansion of our city. There has been fantastic engagement in the early stages of the development of our action plan thus far. The community survey has been open, and a high level of engagement has resulted in the survey staying open longer than originally planned. The survey, as I said in the last response, is due to close shortly. These results will influence the LGBTIQA+ focus groups which are planned to run in the coming months, and council staff are now meeting with reference group members so meetings can begin shortly. Question 3 is from Tammy Robertson regarding community safety and security. Two questions from Ms Robertson. First question is, what are the administrators for the City of Casey doing to ensure the community are safe against gang, youth and violent crimes that are occurring in local shopping centres and at bus stops and home invasions? And the second question is, can the administrators start putting CCTV and emergency buttons in hotspots of crime, e.g. Lyle Street bus stops, Clydesdale Square, Fountain Gate bus stops? Our children are not safe. Adding extra PSOs to crime hotspots would be a great idea to lobby with state and federal governments. Local MPs seem to be ignoring these matters due to the race of offenders. In response, Council can comment as follows. The City of Casey is committed to creating a safe and inclusive Casey for all residents. We do this through various programs, grant applications and partnerships with organisations such as Victoria Police, Neighbourhood Watch, Casey, the federal and state governments, Safer Casey Community Reference Group and many other community groups. Council's role in community safety is to work with police and other agencies collaboratively to prevent crime and antisocial behaviour. Council also plays an active role in the design and management of council-controlled and managed places. Community safety is everyone's responsibility, and we encourage residents to be proactive about their personal safety. We also encourage residents to report all crime to Victoria Police or Crime Stoppers Victoria. In response to question 2, CCTV and duress alarms for public safety are a public order and law enforcement issue, and that's the responsibility of the state government and Victoria Police. Police have deployed a CCTV trailer at the Lyell Street bus hub and Narre Warren station on a number of occasions in the past. These are done at the discretion of Police Command. Public transport hubs such as bus stops are the responsibility of PTV, and Council continues to work with Public Transport Victoria on communicating community concerns regarding safety and crime. Council's role in community safety is to work with police and other agencies collaboratively to prevent crime and antisocial behaviour. Council also plays an active role in the design and management of council-controlled and managed places. Question 4 is from Paul Greenham, rates notice. How can Casey Council charge a rates notice, should be an invoice for services, to any man or woman as they are not now or have never been part of the Commonwealth Government of Australia? Council is very clear about its role and responsibility and legal role in the matter of rates, and I confirm the following response. Council has the right to charge rates on the property for the following legislative reasons. 1, the Parliament of Victoria used the power given to it by the Constitution Act 1975 to enact the Local Government Act 1989 Victoria and subsequently the Local Government Act 2020 Victoria. Section 14 of the Local Government Act 2020 Victoria provides that a council is a body corporate. City of Casey is therefore a body corporate. 2, if you refer to sections 220Q of the Local Government Act 1989 Victoria, as replicated by section 15 of the Local Government Act 2020, you will see that the Governor in Council has the power to make an order creating a new council. In December 1994, the Governor in Council made an order creating the Casey City Council. The order was published in the Victorian Government Gazette on the 15th of December 1994. And 3, pursuant to section 158 of the Local Government Act 1989, Casey City Council is required to declare rates and charges every financial year. In addition to this, section 156 of the Local Government Act provides that the owner of any rateable land is required to pay the rates and charges on that land. And we are adopting a budget for public exhibition this afternoon. Question 5 is also from Paul Greenham, and the subject matter is drag queen shows. Do the drag queen show members all have a Working with Children's check card approved before the council approved the shows? We can confirm that all staff and presenters at events designed to engage children within the City of Casey must have a Working with Children check. Question 6 is from Annette Newey with respect to meeting time change. I think this is a matter we addressed at the last council meeting as well. And the question is, at the last meeting I asked administration of this council if they would change the meeting time from an unreasonable 4 p.m. start to accommodate the working class and parents and carers of young children. Nolene Duff, that's me, had eloquently pointed out that there are over 300,000 families living in Casey and the difficulty of catering to so many residents. But I didn't receive an answer. I totally agree that 365,000 residents is a lot to cater to. However, we all have a role to play in shaping our community. It is our responsibility as constituents of Casey to address our concerns and share our suggestions with Casey administration, as is the Casey administration's responsibility to address our needs. Will the Casey administration change this starting time so the working class stops being excluded from attending the monthly meetings? I can advise Ms Newey that Council adopted its meeting schedule for 2023 in December of last year, and that's been committed to in public advertising and via Council resolution. Council will consider the 2024 meeting start times and dates when adopting the annual 2024 meeting schedule in December of this year. And our final question, question 7, is also from Annette Newey, and the subject matter is smart cities. Who is endorsing the smart cities, also known as 15-minute cities? And if this project should go ahead, is there any confirmation that people's movement won't be restricted, traced or tracked, and that no expensive tolls will be imposed, nor charges per kilometre be invoiced should anyone need to leave their 15-minute cities? I can respond. I believe Ms Newey is actually referring to the state government's Metropolitan Planning Strategy Plan Melbourne, which establishes a commitment to delivering 20-minute neighbourhoods throughout Melbourne. The 20-minute neighbourhoods are about giving people the option to live locally by having the ability to access most of their daily needs, like shops, schools and parks, conveniently within a 20-minute walk, cycle or public transport journey from home. It is not about limiting people's movement, but about improving opportunities to access local services. 20-minute neighbourhoods are a long-term aspirational vision for Metropolitan Melbourne, as adopted by the state government, and it will evolve over time. So I thank all of those submitters for their questions this afternoon. And with that, I will move to item 5, officer reports. And the first report on our list this afternoon is item 5.1, which is the corporate planning and budget document endorsement for public exhibition. And I'd just like to introduce this before I seek a mover and a seconder from the panel, just to provide a bit of context as to what the purpose of this report is. So today we are launching for community consultation our draft budget 23-24 and draft annual action plan 23-24 as part of our suite of key strategic documents. These documents set out how the council will invest in the city's future within the constraints of tighter economic conditions, as we try to work striking the right balance between financial sustainability and being responsive to community needs. And that's increasingly difficult. Our draft budget for 23-24 totals $542.26 million, including a $467.44 million operational budget and a $74.82 million capital works program. We have determined in this draft, and we seek the community's input, we seek to meet our previous commitments to not exceed the rate cap, and I'd also like to acknowledge the significant financial hardship that many of our residents and ratepayers have faced over the past 12 months, and this budget has a specific resolution in response to those issues. So with that, I will hand over to and seek a mover and a seconder for item 5.1.
Thank you,
Chair,
Chair.
I will move the recommendations for item 5.1.
You're moving, Mr Boardman?
Yes,
Thank
I
you.
move.
I'll second that.
And a seconder, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, thank you for your opening remarks and acknowledging that we are adopting for release for public consultation for significant corporate documents to reiterate the draft council plan 2021-25, which includes the year 3 review, the draft budget, which includes the schedule of fees and charges and the capital works program, the draft annual action plan, cover the periods for 2023-2024, and also to discuss the hardship provisions within those strategies. Chair, what I would like to start with is a consistent approach to how we have presented these documents previously and how we have provided detailed updates on the Council's financial position and what that means to the potential for the organisation to continue to deliver services at a very high level and to meet community expectations. And we've embarked upon this journey under a number of strategic objectives and a number of principles that have contributed substantially to our decision making in this regard. There are 7 key objectives which we have discussed previously, and I'd like to again take the opportunity to inform the community of what they are. The first one is to deliver sustainable infrastructure and activate places, so to ensure that we are meeting our obligations to ensure that the complete provision of council infrastructure, whether it be roads, nature strips, recreational facilities, open spaces, cultural leisure precincts, etc., are delivered and provided on a basis that meets not just our budgetary and financial considerations, but what community expectations are. The second objective is to grow our current and emerging sectors. So look at what is the current economic activity that underpins the municipality of Casey. What are the future economic activities and what we can do as an organisation to attract further investment, to develop local businesses, to revitalise activity centres, and to ensure that we are facilitating employment pathways. The third objective is to look at how we as an organisation can contribute to not just the statutory provisions on what's called the circular economy, but to ensure that we do have environmentally sustainable practices. I spoke at length at the most recent council meeting around our renewable energies targets and our strategies, which I described very clearly as an economic policy rather than a climate policy. And any move that an organisation such as Casey, and in fact any municipality for that matter, can to limit its impact on traditional fuels to provide not just a pathway for adaptation of technology-ready renewable energy processes, but to facilitate investment in that regard, can only be seen as a sensible policy measure to not just generate further economic activity, but also to meet statutory obligations. And we are very conscious of the role that we play, and particularly the leadership role in that regard. The fourth objective is to advocate to the state and federal governments on key service infrastructure delivery, noting very clearly that both the state and the federal government, leading up to their budgets to be delivered next month, are operating in a very constrained financial environment. Both governments are making no secret that these budgets potentially will have a number of shocks in it, not just because of the relevant debt positions of both governments, but also because of raising interest rates, the interest to debt ratios that are on the state and Commonwealth balance sheets, and also potential reductions in Commonwealth and state revenues, particularly as it relates to delivery of local services. We have to be very conscious of that. The fifth one is to continue to deliver a resilient, active and connected local community. So to look at the total provision of services, the role that we play in providing a platform and coordinating in a connected basis to deliver community services. We've been very open and very forthright about objective number 6 around good governance and transparent decision making. And we'll talk about the governance rules later in this meeting, but also our obligation as administrators to ensure that we are being very conscious of how we make our decisions, how we communicate those decisions, and how we ensure that the community is involved as best as possible in that decision-making process. And finally, objective number 7 is to create an adaptable, innovative, financially sustainable organisation that continues to deliver maximum benefit, which is a reiteration of my opening remarks. It is not going to be received well through some members of the community, and referencing your comments, Chair, around the rate cap increase. The state has capped the rate cap increase at 3.5%. We have little option but to pass that on to the community as part of the draft budget process, for no other reason except that we have been very clear and consistent about the increased cost pressures this organisation is faced with, not just insofar as meeting current capital works obligations and service deliveries, but also looking at what the industrial relations and employment landscape currently presents from a range of challenges. Also, from the long-term nature of the contracts and investments that we as an organisation need to execute to ensure that we can continue to deliver these high levels of services on an ongoing basis. When we have inflationary pressure around about 7-8%, and yes, it thankfully is trending downwards, but that is being passed on at every level of our administration. So whilst we need to be conscious of ensuring we do not overtly disadvantage the community, we also need to be very conscious of continuing to deliver these services and the expectation of the community within the challenges that the current economic situation provides. And one of those issues that we have articulated in our corporate documents is meeting the obligations of the Victorian Government under the Waste Curbside Reform Program, which will come into place finally by 2027. There is a significant cost impost to do this. It is state legislation, we are very conscious of it, but it comes at a cost to council to meet their expectations and to ensure that we can continue to provide the services. And we'll be saying quite a lot more about this in future financial year programs, but to be very frank around what we are trying to do as an organisation is to meet our existing obligations, to plan for the future by having fiscal and corporate governance best practice at the core of our decision making, but also taking into account what some of the future expectations from the state government and from other organisations are. Doing that, we have looked at what is a hardship provision package to deal with organisations and members of the community that might be experiencing financial stress. There are three provisions that we need to be very conscious of, and we need to be articulating this clearly to all members of the community that if you are faced with a degree of pressure or a degree of hardship, to contact us and we'll work through a solution that meets everyone's best interests. The first one is that there is a suspension of the late payment penalty interest up to the 30th of June of this year. That will be funded directly from savings across council budget. So we will not be charging any late payment penalty interest for any rates that are due in this financial year. We will also be deferring any legal action on the recoverability of rates, and we will also be suspending interest on approved arrangements to future payment plans. So if you are contacting us and if you need to extend your payment plan, or if you need to be in a situation to look at deferring payments, we will be not passing on additional interest whilst we agree to the payment plan to meet your expectations. As the Chair has said, these documents, whilst they are a statutory requirement, they are not final. We are adopting a recommendation this afternoon to release them for public consultation. We will be holding a meeting specifically to hear from members of the public on the 30th of May to include that feedback into our final decision making, in addition to any other community feedback through Casey Conversations, through direct consultation with our officers or any other means of communications, to ensure that we have consulted with the community as widely and as extensively as we can to incorporate that feedback into our final decision making. So I do encourage members of the community to read the documents, to understand some of the challenges that we are experiencing, to be conscious that it is not an easy decision to be passing on a cost increase during these times, but to be confident equally that we do so on the basis that we want to continue to meet all of our obligations to the community primarily, but also to meet our statutory obligations, particularly to the state government and to other organisations, both from contracts, from service delivery, from fees and charges, but to continue to provide that high level of service, which is the paramount importance to all of us at this organisation. So I move the recommendation as put. I look forward to hearing more from the community in regards to what their feedback and what significant improvements that we can potentially make when we finally adopt these papers. And I will very much look forward to be present on the 30th of May to hear from the community directly.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second this motion tonight and note that we are not adopting these documents. We are releasing them for public consultation, and I, like Mr Boardman, look forward to a further meeting on the 30th of May where we will hear community input and work that into the final decision we'll be making later this year. I note, I don't want to repeat too much of what Mr Boardman has articulated, but I think it's important for the community to be aware that I've also considered the duty that we've got or that I've got as administrator to consider the increases that are being made in this budget and the reason for those. I'm aware of this budget proposing an increase in cost or a cost escalation, which is in keeping with the rate cap. On my reading of the budget papers, it's appropriate that that occur because of the fact that has already been addressed by Mr Boardman, and that is that there are cost escalations occurring in the community which are greater than that, and the economic situation and condition means that we are encountering increased costs. I'm confident, however, that the operational budget that's been proposed is going to allow for the delivery of crucial services across our city, including kindergarten, maternal and child healthcare services, waste management and infrastructure maintenance within the budget that is proposed. I note that Council is committed to identifying and taking opportunities that will transform services to be more efficient while continuing to meet key community service expectations. I think this will be achieved through continuing good governance, decision making and by embedding community voice into our actions. The challenges to this budget have been brought by external factors, as I've discussed, and Council has strengthened, will always strengthen its strategic focus on consolidating its capital works program with no new initiatives outlined in the draft budget. Our Council Works program therefore includes a mix of continuing projects and renewal of some infrastructure and assets across the city. And if I can address what some of those will be, the key projects to be completed over the next 12 months as set out in these budget papers include over $3 million for the Bellardo Road to South Gippsland Highway intersection, over $2 million for the Ray Baston Reserve redevelopment, over $1.5 million for playground improvement works. Additionally, Council is also proposing investing over $20 million into roads, over $19 million into recreational, leisure and community facilities, and $6 million into parks, open space and streetscapes. We're also seeking to invest significantly into major services, including over $50 million towards waste management services, over 45 towards child, youth and family services, and $23 million towards community connection and wellbeing. So certainly great thought has gone into our capital works budget and how it will be spent, but noting that we are, as always, mindful of projects which were adopted in the previous year and ensuring that we can continue to meet communities' expectations and delivery. So that's where the budget sits at the moment. It'll be open for community input until the Tuesday the 9th of May, and like Mr Boardman, I look forward to that meeting on the 30th of May, at which community will have the opportunity to put its considerations to Council. I look forward to hearing those considerations. I invite the community to comment on the budget. It'll be brought up now and available, but to continue to read it and to consider it and to consider matters on which they wish to be heard. And with those comments, I'm happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmont. Thank you both for your extensive comments on the adoption of the draft budget. It's probably worth giving some commentary around the community engagement processes that Council utilises to just outline some of the input and background to community input thus far. So whilst this is about the community commenting on a draft budget, the input that has been sought from the community has actually been quite extensive to this point, building on the Shape Your City work that was done from 2020 onwards. 2 years ago that was, and now this year there's been a further check-in process, and that check-in process has been actually quite extensive. So there has been, and that's been really targeting what the community regards as the priorities for council, particularly around service provision, and has utilised a number of tools to look at the community. Now, I'll just very, very quickly work through those. There have been more than 3,800 responses to an online survey and participatory budgeting tool, and a whole range of face-to-face engagement pop-up and workshop opportunities across the municipality in the last several months. And the endeavour has been to target a broad range of groups and diversity within the City of Casey. So within that, there have been 10 pop-up events across Doveton, Cranbourne East, Tooradin, Berwick, Clyde North and Lynbrook, 14 community workshops across Cranbourne, Lynbrook, Narrewarr and Endeavour Hills, Blind Bite, Berwick, Hampton Park, Cranbourne West, and with Casey's Indian, Afghan, LGBTQI+, and African coastal and Spanish communities. And there have been a total of 1,025 conversations with the community recorded. In particular, there was an interest this year in ensuring there was the voice of children and young people involved in the engagement program. And so Shape Your City check-in packs, it's a technical term for the consultation opportunity, were distributed to 50 plus kindergartens across the municipality, where 4,261 children were given the opportunity to comment. And I think that the terminology used in that consultation was to build their dream cities for this community across council's 9 key service areas. So 2 workshops were also held with in Casey's youth centres, and over 450 young people under the age of 25 contributed to that program. So that's a fairly extensive sample and well thought out engagement opportunity across a range of groups within the city, acknowledging it's not all, but we're never going to have a process that captures everyone's input. I also just want to say thank you to those staff that have been involved in the collective process. It is an enormous exercise in putting together this budget, taking into account those community views, taking into account the council's priorities as set by ourselves as the panel, and the thought and leadership and work that goes into presenting this draft budget for community input has been enormous. So I do want to, on behalf of the panel, pass on my appreciation to the team here led by our Chief Executive Officer, Glenn Pattison. With that, I will put the motion to the vote and seek all those in favour. Carried. Thank you. We now move to 5.2, those people that are following the agenda. That is on page 252, so we're jumping a long distance into a big document. And that is item 5.2, the adoption of the governance rules. So can I have a mover and a seconder for item 5.2?
Yes, I'll move item 5.2.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar?
Thank you, Chair. These governance rules are returning to Council tonight after having been on public exhibition. The purpose of these governance rules, among other matters, is to set out the procedure by which Council meetings will be conducted in the future. It is fundamental to good governance that any organisation understand clearly the basis and the rules under which its meetings are conducted, at which it adopts policies and passes resolutions with regards to the work that it intends to do. The policies that we are adopting tonight are the framework under which this council will continue to be governed going forward into the future, and I note in particular after October 2024, at which time there will be an elected council. It's fundamental that these rules are set out very clearly and in a manner that is very easy to read and to follow, just how the election of mayor will occur, how the election of deputy mayor will occur, and how council business will be conducted. Councils operate in a number of different ways and make decisions in a number of different ways, but obvious and fundamental way in which they do it is at a public meeting, at a council meeting, and these rules make it clear to the community how those meetings are conducted, how votes are taken, how points of order are taken, the whole gamut of activity that occurs at a council meeting. Some may consider it a little bit dry and boring at times, but it is the sort of document which anybody who is interested in council business and in council governance should be familiar with. And I want to thank those members of council who have worked on this document. It is a cutting-edge document for a modern council and will ensure that into the future anybody that either stands for council or is a member of council will know clearly what the playing field rules are and how to abide by them. And so with those comments, I am happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, anything to add?
Chair, I don't have much more to add, as the governance rules have been discussed extensively in this forum, and Mr Belmar has quite eloquently surmised their importance and the significance that they represent, not just to those who are interested in the good governance of the organisation, but to those potential candidates seeking election at the next council elections. If they're successful, this will be the public contract in which they will operate under. This will set the tone of behaviour. This will set the rules of engagement between their fellow councillors, and it will go a long way to ensuring not just council meetings, but conduct of councillors overall are respectful, professional, and meet the objectives of the community and the organisation as a whole. So I acknowledge that we have not had any suggestions, although there has been a degree of engagement through downloads and viewing of the documents online, but they are extensive, they are an essential document for those seeking election and those subsequently elected. I am pleased to move them as the recommendation has put accordingly.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I too support this new set of governance rules. Integrity issues have been a very serious matter of allegations at this council, and this set of governance rules, in my view, sets what are best practice and the highest standards of integrity for a council to abide by. And as you've said, they set the rules of engagement and the expectations for a new council, as well as, obviously, our practice and processes in the remainder of our term of office. So I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.3 is the Southern Casey Community Hub project endorsement. I seek a mover and a seconder.
Chair, I will move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman, and a seconder.
Yes, I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, would you like to speak to item 5.3?
Chair, I will speak briefly to this recommendation as we are again releasing for public engagement and to create hopeful community awareness around the proposed Cranbourne Hub project, which is the existing council car park at 1 to 3 Lyle Street in Cranbourne. What we are seeking is to, as I said, raise awareness around the proposed scope, the timing, the estimated cost, and to receive a report from council office following that engagement, which will be a significant factor on our further evaluation and consideration of the proposed project, and to look at options which are not just meeting what community expectations are in Cranbourne, but potentially act as catalysts for further revitalisation of the Cranbourne Activity Centre, in addition to looking at the development from a fiscal responsible and investment basis. Now, very briefly, Chair, this is a proposed multi-user hub that potentially could consolidate a range of council and community services into a contemporary fit-for-purpose facility. As I said, the additional motivation is to look at what is quite an attractive site. We, as administrators and senior officers, have viewed and visited the site a number of times, and to look at it not just from consolidating customer services, potential library outposts, meeting spaces for the community, and a range of other smaller suites for community engagements and meetings, but also to really stimulate further improvement to the Cranbourne Activity Centre and to look at how we can best provide ongoing services through such a facility. Whilst the motivation and the conception of this is meritorious, the cost is significant. The estimate at this stage, which is in the public council papers, is just over $40 million. The proposal at this stage is that could be funded, and I say could be funded, through rate revenue. There could be some loans or some borrowings involved in that, and also the additional income that would be produced through land disposal. There would absolutely be an attempt to attract state government funding into such a facility of this significance, which is consistent with our strategic objectives, and we would look at how we can potentially leverage further property sales or disposals to supplement. We have released a Cranbourne Major Activity Centre Master Plan, which considered this project as a significant part of that, and what we are doing tonight is completely consistent with the provisions and the approach taken over the Major Activity Centre Master Plan. We do acknowledge as administrators that whilst we are operating in a range of challenging investment and fiscal environments at the moment, this facility itself has a number of other benefits beyond just the infrastructure provisions, which will be considered as part of our decision making. But tonight, we are not making a decision on it. There is some significant community engagement to be undertaken, and until we have concluded that community engagement, we will not be making a decision at this stage. It is unknown what the level of community appetite to deliver a project of this financial consideration. Certainly the scope, the type of services that's provided within the draft plans and the location, and we do need to go through quite a comprehensive degree of community engagement to not just contribute to the transparency of decision making, but also to test the community's appetite and demand to this facility, and also to ensure that we're meeting the mix of facilities that's proposed in what the community's expectations are. So there is some significant background material that's being released tonight for community engagement. I would encourage members of the Cranbourne community to familiarise themselves with what we are releasing, to engage, as the chair has articulated through the previous item, the range of measures that we provide the community to talk and to communicate with us, and to give us the feedback based upon all those factors that I have articulated tonight around cost, location, the mix of community facilities, the demand, the impact that it potentially have on other investments and revitalisation of the overall activity centre, and any other factors we haven't considered. So I know the recommendation is in 5 parts. I agree with the recommendation as put, and I look forward to receiving the detailed analysis and reports following the community consultation, meeting the expectation and making a sound decision in the future around the future of 1 to 3 Lyell Street in Cranbourne.
Mr. Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. Like Mr. Boardman, I'm also happy to second this motion and see it as a great opportunity the revitalisation of Cranbourne with an asset such as this, which at the moment is a council car park, and it's a sort of land holding which can appropriately be put to a better use for the enjoyment of the community. Ultimately, this afternoon we're putting this out to the community for their input. I know that like Mr. Boardman, I do share concerns about the way that a project like this can be funded at this particular time, and that is one of the reasons why community input is appropriate. But also, it is important to seek community input into matters such as the flexibility of the use of this future potential council asset. Having had the opportunity to visit a number of other hubs. It's interesting to note the way that these hubs can be designed to be flexible in their use to ensure that they are put to the best use at all times by the community. And so it's absolutely appropriate that a project such as this be benefit from as much community input as possible in the development stage, in the design stage. There is a lot of work that's gone into this already. I note that in the council papers we are proposing a timeline, and it is appropriate and good strategic governance to ensure that we're not just proposing this on the never. We have got a timeline that we've put out there as to when we think this could be achieved, and deadlines that we would like to be able to keep to. So with those comments and noting that over the last 12 months at council we've also adopted a master plan for Cranbourne, it's appropriate that we continue that work of revitalising Cranbourne and its activity centre, and ensuring that the land owned by council is always put to its best use. And with those comments, I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.4 is contract variation for the Browns Road Active Open Space Reserve, Package D. Do I have a mover and seconder?
Yes, I'll move this.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Second, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Chair, this item comes to council tonight because of the budgetary implications of what is occurring. I note from the council papers that council has previously adopted a contract with respect to the construction of a recreation reserve facility at Browns Road. As a result of an original contract approved in 2020, it's now necessary that further funds be expended. The background for that includes matters such as security improvements and upgrades that need to occur at the site to upgrade concrete and gate access for emergency, electrical and lighting upgrades to the reserve, and landscape and civil interface mitigation surface treatments. I have considered the confidential attachments to the meeting papers, and I note that delivery of the project is well advanced, with practical completion scheduled for now, April 2023, and that approving this will enable final payments and final satisfactory works to be completed. With those comments, and noting as always the careful work that is done by council officers in putting together these sorts of documents, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, anything to add?
Not really, Chair. I acknowledge Mr Belmar's explanation of the recommendation. Thank him for that. And I've also considered the confidential documents and the consistency with policy and our approach to decision-making in such matters, and agree with the recommendation and Mr Belmar's comments.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.5 is Casey Growth Areas payment from reserves, April 2023. Is there a mover?
I'll move that, Chair.
Boardman, and a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, a procedural recommendation authorising the Chief Executive Officer or delegate to make payments in accordance with the confidential attachment, which I have reviewed and agree with the rationale and the policy consistency applied to the recommendation. This is to consider payment of claims for the equalisation of the public open space contributions. The confidential report does include a list of the projects and the payments from the public open space contributions reserves sought for authorisation, and again I have reviewed and acknowledged that it is consistent with our approach in these matters. These activities are carried out in accordance with the Planning Environment Act and the Subdivision Act. The payments are only made subject to council satisfaction that all public land and assets are vested in the council. And again, that is a key consideration of the decision making and the scope of the recommendation. So having reviewed the confidential information provided to us and compliance with our statutory obligations and consistency with our policy approach in such matters, I am pleased to move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. As Mr Boardman did with the second or the immediate motion which preceded this one, I also note this is a procedural motion. I've noted the attachments and that the appropriate statutory work has occurred leading up to tonight's motion, and with those comments and noting Mr Boardman's assessment, I am happy to second this motion.
Thank you. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.6 are the minutes of the CEO Employment and Remuneration Committee. Is there a mover for the recommendation to note the minutes of that meeting?
Yes, I'm happy to move that motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Would you like to speak to your motion, Mr Belmar?
Thank you, Chair. I will speak briefly, and I'll note that that there are confidential minutes attached to the meeting papers. This committee met on the 28th of March of this year. It's a requirement under the Local Government Act that we have a policy and a regular meetings with the Chief Executive Officer, Glenn Patterson. I want to thank him for the work that he's done over the years and note the continuing excellent work that he and all his team continue to do at Council, at Casey. This is a council because of a whole number of matters, but including the fact that it is a growing community, continues to always create opportunities for excellent and cutting-edge local government responses and approaches to opportunities that arise. And as always, he and his team are able to do that and meet the challenge. I also want to note that it's really now that we're coming out of the COVID time that we're starting also to have an opportunity to see the work that he and his team can do when not faced with the lockdown restrictions, and I look forward to that continuing work over the next 18 months that I will be in this position. But I'm sure that it'll be a interesting period into the future, just as the past has been. And with those comments, I'm happy to move this motion.
Chair, if I could make some very brief comments, and I acknowledge and agree with everything that Mr Belmar has said. Also to acknowledge I was present on the 28th of March at the meeting and acknowledge the contribution and thank Margaret Devlin for her independent chairing of this process, this statutory compliance. Whilst we can comment on the CEO's performance extensively, and Mr Belmar has done so, I think it's worthwhile noting, Chair, that the key performance indicators of the CEO's action plan himself are very much, if not indelibly, linked to the council action plan. So the strategic imperatives and the objectives and the actions that the CEO himself need to achieve are specific and very much informed by the corporate action plan that we've discussed for public release earlier in this meeting. So that link is an example of good governance. It certainly provides clarity and confidence to the Chief Executive Officer and his team around our expectations and provides a framework for us assessing performance against those specific outputs much more effectively. And in my view, having been involved in a number of these processes, both on the recipient basis and also on the guidance basis, that is a best practice framework of achieving the best possible outcome from senior executives. So I do thank Mr Patterson and his senior team and all members of the Casey staff for their contribution. It is not just a single effort from one individual, it is a cumulative and collective effort, and without that high level of cooperation and cooperation and collaboration amongst the team, then those indicators would not be achieved. So thank you, Mr Patterson, and all members of your team, and we look forward to further reports on your performance in the future.
Thank you, Mr Boardman, and I do note that the committee comprises the whole panel, the three members of the panel of administrators, chaired by an independent person, that being, in our case at the moment, Margaret Devlin. I also endorse the comments that you've both made and pass on my appreciation to Mr Patterson for the leadership that he provides, and we look forward to our continued work with him and review of his performance over the coming year. So I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. The last item this afternoon is item 5.7, which is section 11A, Instrument of Authorisation, Planning and Environment Act 1987. Is there a mover for the recommendation?
Yes, I'll move.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar, and a seconder.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Chair, I think Mr Boardman and I are both smiling because we regularly move motions of this nature. They are fundamental to the good governance of this council and to ensure that at all times council officers are working with the correct delegations, which only we as council at this meeting can properly authorise and approve, and ensure that when planning permits and the like and other statutory documents are signed by officers, they have the force of law. So, despite the fact I'm smiling when I move these motions, they are fundamental to ensuring that all decisions made by Casey have the force of law at all times. I'd also like to note that whenever I review these names and those being added, I'm always struck by the fact that our staff is an incredibly diverse workforce, and it shows that this is a council which takes seriously the matters that we address in your opening comments this afternoon, and that is that we're a diverse community, and we ensure that that diversity is reflected in all the work and in everything that this council does. And with those comments, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, anything to add?
Chair, I wholeheartedly agree and endorse Mr Belmar's comments.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. That concludes officer reports this afternoon. I'll move to item 6, which is consideration of reports of committees, and I note the reports of committees as listed in the agenda papers. Item 7, petitions. There are none this afternoon. Item 8, urgent business. There is none. Item 9, there are no closed council matters for consideration this afternoon. So that leaves me finally with item 10 to close the meeting and thank those members of the community who have attended and who have observed the meeting live stream. And I bid you good afternoon. Thank you.